Hello and a very warm welcome to everyone. I am Shah and today we have a session on reshaping the compliance landscape in 2022 and beyond. Before we deep dive into the panel discussion, let's do some context setting on the same. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the very way we do business, disrupting everything from global supply chains to financial markets. As we gradually move to a post-COVID world, business models are constantly adapting and being rebuilt. This is not just for enterprises that have moved online during the pandemic, but even for those that ran offline as they digitized their accounting and tax compliances or started accepting digital payments. Most business owners and laypersons construe compliance as annoying or irksome, even as business owners in India are observing a massive seismic shift in the compliance landscape in India.
Recording in progress.
There's a clever and robust integration to create scores of watchdogs to maintain compliance with the government and quasi-government bodies like the NSE, penalizing about 250 companies for non-compliance with listing regulations. This means that the cost of non-compliance would be more than the cost of compliance. But what are the new compliance trends for 2022? How can there be automation in tax compliances, and what future disruptions can be expected in the Indian compliance space? To break it all down, please help me welcome Nehal Shah, Head Compliance Legal and Secretarial CareEdge Limited, Jairaj Kulangara, CFO, SFO Technologies, Balachandran Kadam, CFO, Shivco India Private Limited, Vikas Jain, CFO, Adama India, Satyan Trivedi, CFO, ILFS Maritime Infrastructure Company Limited, Ved P. Goyal, CFO, Dr. Lal Path Labs, and Rohit Razdan, Chief Business Officer, Clear. So let's explore the nitty-gritties of this changing landscape and what really the future of compliance looks like in a post-COVID scenario. The session will also look into the roadmap for 2022 and beyond, disruptions expected, and how building a unified platform for the finance function beyond industry lines can help adapt to the changes that we are witnessing. I would sort of begin with you, Nehal here, and just to sort of give, and just nothing in particular, but beginning with a female speaker. You work closely with regulatory authorities like the SEBI, ROC, and MFI. According to, if I were to ask you, what do you think really are the future disruptions expected in Indian compliance in 2022 and beyond? What do you think are those? You're on mute.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Shrija, for the question, which is most debated across the field and in our fraternity as well. The disruption, of course, it's there, but at the same time, I would say it's a more efficiency which is, coming into the system. Because if you look at all the regulators, be it SEBI, RBI, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, or financial intelligence units, these are the regulators which are basically regulating the, broadly the financial market. And these are the regulatory agencies which has adopted the kind of, the technology which is like, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, or robotic process, automatic processes and all, which helps them to improve their system, number one. Number two, the speed at which now they are processing the data is also has gone up extremely high. To give an example, earlier, like for example, regulator used to come for offsite inspection, let's say once in a year when I was in earlier profile of, when I was in asset management industry. Now they have a set of a system through which they will monitor by sitting there on a real-time basis. So they have developed a system through which you are asked to, upload the data, and then they will just process it very quickly, and they will send you the alerts also, and you're expected to revert them very quickly. At the same time, if you look at the regulatory system, they have adopted this, the high-tech for their surveillance system. For example, SEBI earlier used to depend on NSE for the, surveillance alerts, but now they have developed their own, back-end process through which a lot of alerts they generate, and based on which they do take the action, or they send out, the inquiry notices, and, expect the intermediaries and the company to revert to them. So the question here is that basically earlier, Of course, they used to do all these activities, but the speed at which is now happening has gone much, much higher. And this is going to be a continuous journey, because we are now looking at it. A lot of companies are kind of adopting, the blockchain as a part of the businesses. So as a SEBI, so as an RBI. In fact, both this regulatory has actually adopted, has set up actually the technical committee, which is looking into how they can enhance their own system, and how they can also support the upcoming fintech as an industry as a whole, so that the expectation of industry and the expectations of the regulators are kind of come on the same platform. Come to the corporate side. Now, I have spoken much on the kind of regulatory space, of course. Now, come to the corporate or the intermediary side. While it is very good that the overall regulatory system has become very, very efficient, but at the same time, the work on the compliance side will definitely has gone up and will continue to increase. Now, what the company should do it in that process, and what they've been doing it also, of course, there are two roles which compliance plays critically, broad level. One is an advisory, where there is subjectivity is involved, and one is basically a non-advisory, which involves a lot of monitoring, a lot of other activity which can be digitized, which can be for which you can deploy the regulatory tools, and with which you can definitely reduce your kind of burden or kind of a routine activity. And this is again going to be a very, very ongoing exercise to improve the processes at the company point of view. But yes, for the compliance function at the corporate level or at the market intermediate level, the activity definitely is going to go up from here, or it's going to go up gradually. That's from my side.
So absolutely clarity here that compliance and the world of compliance is only going to get higher and higher. And there's no way that corporates and regulators are going to take a step back from this. That is the messaging loud and clear coming initially at the beginning of the conversation. Taking it a little forward, and I think my question here is essentially for you, Rohit, from clear perspective. Now, if you look at RegTech is fast becoming the new buzzword in the compliance space. So when you say RegTech, what essentially do you mean? You mean regulation and technology. But technology is evolving so fast that regulation is not being able to keep pace with it. So I want to ask you that what do you think are some of the use cases of changing the compliance function? And then perhaps we can also talk about the exact role of supply chain financing and invoice discounting, some of the new business areas where we're seeing compliance playing a huge role. Yes, Rohit.
Yeah, so thank you, Shija, for the question, and hi everybody. So I think actually I would say that I would actually flip what you said at the very beginning, right? That regulations are struggling to keep pace with technology. I would say it is the reverse in India. Okay, let me tell you what I mean, and I'll go a couple of steps further there, right? And as the listeners and the other panelists may be aware or may not be aware, our business is technology, to infuse technology in compliance, right? And I feel like fundamentally what people miss, right, is, I think as Nehal rightly pointed out, compliance is going to keep going up. But let me kind of, before I come to our product, how we think about it, right? One aspect of what we do is we try to gauge, because one of our core constituents is the regulator, right? Like we are a distributor of a regulatory regime, right? We take those products in every company and we make them kind of happen over there, right? In the right shape and form. So we try to at least guess where the regulator is going, and I would say we are fairly successful at this point of time, at least understanding what their thought process is, right? I think there's 2 or 3 things here which are very, very cutting edge for me, right? The number one thing is probably we are running the deepest, API regulatory stack in the world at this point of time, right? What do I really mean by that, right?
That's well said. Yeah.
Right. So the government has decided overall, and this is not actually, it is even broader than regulations, but but just like, if you take the UPI analogy, right? Mm-hmm. The government has decided that we want to jump 2 or 3 orbits in the same go. We don't have time as a country, right? With so many poor people, so many gaps, we can't go linearly. right? So now they're saying, okay, what is the end state which is thinkable for us, right? Let's say the end state is all bank accounts connected and this and that. Now they realize to roll it, they will only stay on the back end. They will outsource the back end to a third party, developer or whatever, and create APIs to multiple form factors, because they cannot design all the form factors, right? Gone are the days when you had to design a full SBI to serve the country, right? Now they're saying there have to be 150 SBIs in the country, right? So now they are creating an API stack, and they are saying, let there be all kinds of, user interfaces in front of the customer, right? There might be one, called Beam. There might be another one called Phone Pay, Google Pay. They don't care. They're just saying my API stack, my payment stack has to distribute very fast. Same thing I see happening in compliance today, and it will continue to happen over the next 10 years, in my opinion. Okay. What do I mean by that, right? In compliance world, GST is a fully digital stack, right? Many of you, obviously, all of you actually are very aware. There is no way of paper dealing at all, right? And what they are doing is, hey, we got a backend, we've got APIs. Now you guys connect through whichever interface you want. I don't care. Everything has to be digital. That leads to where Nehal was going, that once everything is digital, then surveillance is very easy, right? The faceless guys, the inspector is gone now, right? Nobody knows who the inspector is. Nobody cares who the inspector is, right? So in one shot, right, you have taken 3 or 4 leaps. And if you look at it, right, just in the last 4 years, right, it's like 4 years old, right? And now this is the way to be. And within those 4 years, we have had riots on GST, everything, rollouts on GST, it's a very short period of time. And government fundamentally, and this is why I think a lot of press and other people don't understand where the government has gone. Government has turned into a startup. What do I mean by that, right? A traditional company fixes things, thinks about it for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, then rolls out things slowly, right? A startup like us, right? Say there's no time, let's roll out, let it break, then we'll fix it in the next iteration. Government is on that.
Yeah, so I think your argument is that, Shrija, perhaps the government has taken a very, very accelerated step when it comes to compliance, essentially. And the face of compliance itself has changed, what you're saying, it's a regulatory perspective, right?
I think it is inevitable. It'll go faster and faster. And as Nehal was pointing to, they are so far ahead. Honestly, we are blown away sometimes by how far and how deep they are thinking. And it is fundamentally all leading to doing generational shifts within 5 years, right? So 20-year shifts in 5 years, right? So I think that is now the fundamental nature of the game, right? Now, anybody at this point of time that is not digital, not thinking technology, not thinking ahead on where it is going, is just going to struggle.
Okay, so you don't believe in the argument that regulation is having to play a catch-up game with technology. You think that regulation is far ahead. And perhaps it's also because of what you mentioned, the API stack, which we have seen beautifully play out in the UPI infrastructure, where we are the cynosure of all eyes across the world of what in the fintech space, particularly. The world is watching us, and I've taken examples from that.
So I feel actually when you look 5 years out, our overall technology stack for anything which is basic infrastructure, right now we're talking regulations, then there is banking, all of these things will actually be best in class globally, right? So and if you look, RBI is right now working on bank number portability, right? So they are going that deep and saying, just like phone number portability between different providers, why shouldn't we be married to one bank? Switch between banks in a heartbeat if you want to, right? So I think overall, the overall regulatory, the apex bodies, right, are now moved in this direction, right? Rest of us have to actually catch up, right? And people are on varied levels on that level of catch up. And the older the company, I think the more they are struggling, right? Despite resources, they are struggling because it's a mindset shift. And government has moved much faster in mindset compared to, I think, most of the companies.
Okay, Vikas, I would like to sort of get you in here, taking it further from sort of what Rohit just outlined. According to him, while regulation has perhaps outpaced technology in most of the cases, his argument is that perhaps the government is doing a 5 years ahead of thinking job. And his argument also is that companies which do not necessarily adapt to the changing realities will find themselves increasingly stuck. So my question to you then really becomes, what does it really mean for a traditional company which is not necessarily understanding the realities of digital transformation, of perhaps what does it really mean to operate a digital world? What would be the future of a company like that? Is it all technology now, where we are headed? Yes, Vikas.
So, if I understand correctly, in the sense for a traditional company who doesn't follow full compliances, the future possibly would be to go to jail, because I think wherein we have so many compliances now, and if a company is not able to track those compliances, especially in our industry, in agri industries, insecticide and pesticides, where there are so many compliances, just a label if MRP is missing, or just because of ink which is gone away from the MRP, or some content, the implication is we might have to go to jail. So I think the important part is, sitting here in office, you cannot say hundreds of compliances are met by almost all the persons sitting in a specific warehouse also. So the company has to have that mindset that they need to change their attitude. Obviously, if government can change, then possibly the corporate should be much faster than that, changing their mindset to be much ahead in this automation game. So I think, and we are seeing that, as I can say, at least few years back, wherein we were having just few people to identify, okay, what are the laws applicable? Are we complying with all those laws or not, including the direct and the indirect tax laws? But now at least we have startups, and we have the platforms wherein it will put all the laws, it will put all the dates when you have to comply with all those things, including taxation or any other law which possibly you have never heard of. So if, at least as a basic this thing, that if you identify everything, then put a checklist that which gives on its own that these are things we have to follow. So it will be a lifesaver. Otherwise, as I said, to comply in today's world is very difficult, wherein, as Rohit mentioned, that when government itself is moving so fast, that first it will put the law and then it will try to correct itself with various amendments and changes. It's better that the companies also have to follow to be in the same race, and at least not leave behind, and be in the same pace with which the government is working.
Yeah, but I think the larger point I wanted to bring to the attention here, that why does it have to be prescriptive in nature? Why there has to be a fear that if I don't do this, I'll go to jail, or I will perhaps be penalized? Why can't the messaging in the boardroom really be that better compliance means better returns for shareholders? It just means better outcomes for business. It just perhaps means better valuation. Isn't that messaging clear in the boardroom yet? What about you, Rohit? When you speak with the companies that you work with, do you think that the leadership is perhaps more and more aligned to this idea or not? Or does it still need too much of schooling still on that premise?
Yeah, so great question, actually, Shisha. So okay, it's a sophisticated question. So what I mean by that is, like, theoretically the answer should be yes, especially for larger companies, because they know, right? Like, good compliance eventually is good business, but when you have quarterly pressures, especially for listed companies, things can get lost, right? Now, actually, before I'll come to this in a second, right? But I'll just kind of, at some level, again, right, because our job as our company is to guess where the regulator is going, right? And I'll just throw some light on what Vikas was saying. Actually, at this point of time, government is not interested in putting anybody in jail. Okay, jails are expensive. Government is running now a very sharp P&L. Okay, government is saying, let's just fine them, right? Give them a 10-day notice and let them fine. Government, see, a lot of you would remember, year and a half, 2 years back, they used to make 85 to 90,000 lakh, 90,000 crores, right, for GST collections, right? Now it's gone to 1.4 lakh crores, right? They have doubled their revenues, right, in the last 2 years during COVID and everything, right? So they are, at this point of time, the agenda is very clear. The country needs a lot of infrastructure, a lot of investments. We can't raise capital because, as a poor country with, relatively speaking, kind of limited balance sheet, we cannot raise so much bonds and so on. Let us just collect from our own people, right? So they have no interest in putting Vikas or anybody in jail. They will send him a nice notice, and where if he doesn't pay, it will accrue at 18%. That's it. So for the government, it's actually a win-win. either the whole damn country will become compliant or their collections will go through the roof. So they are a win-win. Now, with that choice, everybody has a choice, right? So like XYZ person can have a choice, we won't do this, right? The other thing is now what we also are discovering, and I mean, a lot of these things are public actually, right? So there are a lot of journalists that we know who read, who scroll these things and say, okay, there is a notice that is coming on XYZ company for this much crores, right? And that will come in the news, right? So at this point of time, the writing is on the wall. Okay. Now we can all, resist it or do this and that and so on and so forth. That's fine. Government doesn't care, right? It's between you, your shareholder, and your management team. Now, coming back to your question, in my opinion, hardly 20% of the companies have woken up to the realities.
Wow, okay? That's a revelation.
Yeah. Labor laws are coming on API very, very soon. Okay, how many people even follow that? How many people even know, like how many age, like what age is working for you and so on? Government is going to come here hard, right? Like just like, GST compliance, when it came, people have started all the way from, we don't even have data. We are not recording the right data. Invoices are not there. All these things are forced. Now the same thing will happen eventually for ESG, for labor law and all of these things, right? And I think at this point of time, we are still used to treating CFOs as a back-end guy. We are not understanding what their problems are. CFO stack has changed. It has become real time.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
And the CEOs, in my opinion, the CEOs, the boards are still operating CFO as a very back end, like by Kardo, just do something and don't come to me. I think that those days are gone, and the sooner people wake up, otherwise, I mean, the larger guys, right? And the government is going also very systematically. They will come to the larger guys and they will slap them. Okay. And then in that supply chain, everybody will learn the lesson, right? So I think the learning is, the method is very clear now, and we see it in our sets of companies, right? And as soon as people get the first slap, right, and they realize that the litigation here costs like 3 crores, 5 crores, 10 crores, that's it. Ek bar hoga, uske baad mein things will be okay.
Okay, Balachandran, I would sort of like to sort of get you here now, Bala. I mean, interesting conversation thus far in terms of the slugfest between regulation and technology, the kind of role the government is approaching, how it is approaching. It's not necessarily a cat and stick approach, but really taking a step back and saying that it's a soft nudge that you got to do it. There's no way out. And the government is up an intelligent route. Taking it a bit further from what sort of Rohit also outlined, the changing role of CFO. And not necessarily seeing the CFO as the guy who is only there to do your finances, perhaps a modernized Munshi, but somebody who just goes beyond so much more. So 2 questions for you. I mean, from an organization's perspective, from a corporate point of view, I want to ask you the key trends which you think have changed the Indian compliance landscape or are underway. That's number 1. And second, really, any viewpoint on the conversation thus far in terms of this entire slugfest of regulation and technology, the changing role of CFO, and what if traditional companies don't realize the importance of compliance? As Rohit pointed out, 20% of companies still only get it. Yes, Bala.
Yeah, thanks, Srija. And I think the point is very clear in terms of the compliance. What Rohit also mentioned, that very few companies are really serious or acting on this. And now the trend has changed. Especially like with Shupo, where I have spent over a decade, and prior to that also with US MNCs. So I think the compliance over the period has really changed and has got really serious at the board level itself. And like within Shupo, the group level, there is a compliance team, as we were discussing about the uniformity. So basically, there is a regulation, there is a uniformity defined for all the business unit. Like these are the compliances specific to your local laws. Okay, like especially for India, we have been very keen to have everybody trained on few laws like the anti-competition, so the Competition Act, the FCPA. These are some the trends. These are some compliances which we are very strict. It's like every alternate month we have been training, we have been having workshops with our team, and the consequences have been seen within the business units. Like one of the units has got penalized with heavy penalty on the non-compliance due to the Anti-Competition Act. So it's not only just going through the technical details of competition. It's like how you deal with your vendors, how you deal with your customers, what all the rules or what all the steps to be followed while you have an interaction with ex-customers or vendors, and that ultimately causes the huge compliances, non-compliances and penalties and so on. So I think the trend is definitely going towards the digitalization, and we are also in the process. Like there are many vendors who are opting for automation, tracking all these regulation. Every other day you have different regulation change. Like yesterday, I think some odd 20 odd finance regulations got changed. So I think few are definitely in favor of ease of business, doing ease of business, FCRA. So I think there are lots of changes, and trends are going in the right direction. As Rohit also pointed out, governments, regulators are much ahead in terms of the corporates, and like how we did, how we are on the top of this compliance. I think everybody has realized this is the key area which needs to be addressed at a faster pace.
Thanks for that, Bala. Some important ideas sort of came to the fore in terms of, and you also pointed that there has been penalization if one of the business unit is not complying, and that's a hard sort of lesson learned for organization. I would like to sort of bring in Ved here. Ved, from a sort of Dr. Pathlab's perspective, what really sort of has automation meant in terms of compliance for organization, digital transformation? That is my first question. And any comment on the conversation thus far that we've had in terms of the cost of compliance, in terms of corporates not necessarily adhering to it, digital transformation, how the government is outpacing technology when it comes to regulation, and so on. Yes.
Thanks, Rija, and very interesting conversation. I mean, this is a very hot topic and discussion everywhere. Digital automation. So in our company, let me tell you, we are very, very careful, cautious, and we are very proud that we adopted technology and automation much earlier than what probably in the industry player are looking, be it operational side or be it on compliance side. So it's not only on compliance where Rohit was mentioning GST, or for that matter, let's suppose faceless assessment and so on and so forth. Those are anyway, you don't have any option. If you don't adapt that technology, it's like you can't work, because they are not giving any options, whether my way or highway. So it's like you have to adapt to their API or whatever way, because they want this compliance in this fashion. So that's where it's my in my way, it is always necessary, and everybody has to be compliant in adapting those technology or automations. On the operational side, not only on the tax compliance side, but industry like us, we are in healthcare. Let me tell you, so much data, so much compliance, and thanks to this COVID, for last 2 years we have seen, because such a useful this technology has, where people always looking for contactless services. One side is where your customer, patient, they are looking which is embedded by the technology, be it online booking, be it online payment, be it online report downloading, and so on and so forth. But the second part, which is operational, where government, or let's suppose for that matter these medical authorities looking notifications, or where they need real-time data. For example, let's suppose for COVID, they need every hour how much is positive, how much is negative, which kind of segment, which geography, and so on and so forth. Without adopting technology, you can't have such a huge manual work which is possible. So that is where in my view, technology is very adapted in our company. Now come to the second question, where people are talking about where this in my view, no company or no person is going to survive. without adopting this technology, which is very well embedded everywhere, be it compliance, as Nehal was mentioning, it's corporate Ministry of Corporate Affairs, be RBI or be SEBI being listed company. I know how much compliance real time you have to do, and it's a matter of second where you can get a notice immediately, from exchanges or SEBI, because now they have visibility. By adapting this technology, they immediately can catch. And Rohit was mentioning cost of uh, not complying is more than adopting this compliance. So that's I think, in my view, is very, very important. In now technology is everywhere. One can't live without this.
Rohit, I would like to bring you in, taking it further from what Wade sort of outlined. In some sectors, for instance, which got radically shifted with what the COVID-19 brought upon us. And I think healthcare, for instance, was really at the heart of it, just by virtue of where the sector operated. If I were to sort of ask you, when you look at the companies that you work with, which companies do you think, or which boards do you think have been more eager or have been more susceptible to this entire idea of compliance? When I speak with the leadership or the companies, one thing is very clear, that the messaging on digital transformation is loud and clear, that you better adopt, or perhaps you will perish, or you will stuck, or you will not emerge stronger. Some who have digitally transformed have actually emerged more anti-fragile. So I think that messaging on digital transformation side has become very clear across the board, from family-owned businesses to traditional businesses to even new-owned businesses. My question to you on the cost of compliance. When you speak with companies, what are the key 3 or 4 challenges, or the key 3 or 4 hesitations that they have, which is outlined to you? So that's the 2 parts of the question. I think it's an interesting argument, interesting viewpoint that we should hear from you. Yes.
Sure. See, again, we serve a cross section of companies from without taking any names, from some of the largest companies in India to like mid-sized companies around, let's say, 100, 200 odd crores, to all the way to companies which are like 10, 20, 30 crores, and a local CA is using our product to make them compliant and so on. Right? So I'll describe to you where fundamentally, when we think about in terms of customer segments, how the behavior is, right? So there is 2 sets of companies. See, I'll get another perspective, right? And I mean, without making this too complicated, I'll tell you how deep the rabbit hole goes actually in this, okay? Because it's actually a big mindset shift, right? So especially after COVID, right? A lot of people realized that there is actually insane amount of growth available even for very large companies if they get their act right, right? Because market shares shifted more than, kind of in the last 10 years, market shares wouldn't have shifted so much. Now market shares shifted, right? Now there are 3 kinds of companies that in my mind have woken up and everybody else is sleeping. Okay. Number 1 is startups. Okay. Because their whole existence is growth, right? So they are saying growth is life, right? Without that, they are dead. Number 1. Number 2 is they only indulge in technology, right? Or many of them, right? So they are born with technology. They are like, let's call it, just to take random equivalents, that's like, kids these days of like 10 years of age, right? They are born on technology. You don't have to tell them to use mobile, use technology, right? You have to tell your grandmom, right? Not them, right? The second cohort is, as I think, Balachandra was referring to, which are MNCs, right? They have a set of rules which are external, which they are just used to complying, right? So because of set board rules, shareholder rules, they are forced to comply, and for that, they will make essential spends, right? And I would say third are large forward-looking kind of Indian companies, right? Where people would say kind of loosen the purse strings, right? Now, the fundamental problem with everybody else, including this third bucket that I said, is a CFO in general, right? If you see, right, this is fundamental, all CFO functions, right? A CFO has very little budget for their own teams. Okay, they allocate money for everybody else in the org. Okay, revenue wale ko, he needs a CRM. Okay, let's put a CRM. Okay, this person needs something else. Okay, advertising karna hai. Okay, here is a thing for you, right? But for their own teams, right, And fundamentally, Indian CFOs have generally come up the cost way, right? They have not come up the growth way, right?
That's true.
So they have a set of people who can't spend, right? Who don't even know how to ask for money, okay? And they themselves feel very shy in asking for capital for their own teams, okay? So it's a mindset shift, right? And fundamentally, even if they go to a CEO or go to a board, this investment falls to the very bottom, right? So I think only with and when we talk to the regulators, right, they also know this. So they are like, "Arey, koi baat nahi, fine denge, khud hi seekh jayenge," right? So they are very matter of fact about it, right? Okay, it will take 5 years. That's okay, right? Hamara 5 times ho jayega collection, right? So it doesn't matter. So over a period of time, I think there is no solution out. People understand it, right? All the people in this panel, I would say top 20,000 companies understand the future, the realities, but they still can't get themselves to spend. Okay, they will use anything cheap, even if it doesn't work, to come there. And like, I mean, we like look at it and we're like, okay, sure, you want to try this, try it. You will come back to us next month, right?
Okay.
Because hoga nahi, otherwise, it's too tough to be doing yourself.
Let's hear from the CFO here. I would come to Jaya Raj now. Jaya, we've heard all Rohit's comments here in terms of the entire problematic situation, and he has empathy. And he's empathizing with the CFO situation that perhaps the budgets are too restricted for their own function areas. So why is this hesitation when it comes to the cost of compliance from within the organization? Why is he not, he clearly outlined that, listen, Shrija, it's startups and some large forward-looking corporates. Why isn't he taking names of some forward-looking organizations and SME and mid-market companies also, where CFOs are perhaps much and more open to this idea? Because ultimately CFOs also got to be future ready, right? Yeah, Jaya.
Thank you. I saw your message, Rohit. You being so provocative in handling the thing. What you said is right. In fact, what Rohit mentioned here. Absolutely right. See, the thing is that first two parts are there. You asked about why. Why is the prior to having these stringent laws being implemented? There used to be a way out for everything, and there used to be a way of doing things in the manner in which they felt it was right, where CFOs also has to be blamed of. Why? Because they were facilitating that also. Okay, because end of the day, there is a tax savings to be done. Of course, there is a loophole, something has to be done, adjusted, whatever it is. The facilitation was also done. Now, what happens is that, equal responsibility is from the finance fraternity also there with respect to not having the family owners being educated in the right manner in which to do the business to an extent. Now, you are getting a benefit, you are enjoying it really handsome, then why you want to forego? At one point of time, even though whatever laws, government has to implement on that front, that is the thought process. That is the answer to your why side of it. Now, coming to the second side of it, the change side. The change side, I feel that, a slap only can do it, change it. Okay. What happens is that, we see often, I had multiple instances across my peers also, where in which, there has been slap, in a very good manner, as he was, I think, Nehal and, Rohit was also mentioning, they take up large companies, particularly large companies, and ensure that the slap is made known and made visible. Okay, in the media side of it also. Okay, so automatically a fear gripples down to all the people, so effectively, end of the day, they make sure that, they come into a compliance mode. at the earliest. But of course, the damage will be done by that time. With respect to a bigger fines, all those things. So that is needed. That is needed to an extent to whomsoever is not doing the business in the right manner. Okay, end of the day, if you are generating profit, there is an eligible share that we have to do part with the government also in doing it in the right way. Now, at the same manner, also, being compliant, I was listening to all the things, all the technology side also. Yes, all the panelists were right, in fact, in that angle. Because the compliance scenario here in India has gone so far, and they are going for many things, which eventually, if you look and connect the dots to each other, it is going as if a complete integration of the records, everything into a single thing, so that one failure somewhere, it is going to be reflected across, from where you bank in, where your money is going to come in, what exactly you are going to deal with it, everything, it is going to be connected. And we see that things are rolling out, in fact, slowly, step by step. But at the same time, government may be doing that to make sure that they get a more robust tax collection mechanism, they're more robust compliance driven economy, all because. But at the sense, many companies are struggling in that aspect also. As far as we are concerned, we are also a very fairly large organization. We have also implemented using our internally developed side, and also we are using external tools also with respect to the compliance side. I won't say that we are not fully automated also. I am sure that that is the case with most of 90% of the companies operating in India. Okay, that might be the case also. So the role, coming to the last question of yours, the CFO side of it, of course, both the CFO as well as the compliance team, including the company secretary side of it, as well as also, as Rohit was rightly mentioned, the CEOs also has a equal responsibility to ensure that this is back into a compliance mode. A compliant mode, there is no doubt about it.
Okay, Satyan, any sort of comment thus far on the conversation? What really is your viewpoint here?
Yeah, so let me just have a just bit of a background. India is a part of OECD country, and one of the precondition of the OECD country is that every member state has to share a data on a real-time basis. So whatever is happening in the digitization, as the topic is says, why the government is ahead in terms of the technology upgradation side than the corporate world, because this is one of the reasons. Because government, being a part of OECD country, you need to share those data on a real-time basis. My point of view is that going forward, the tax compliance may not be complicated, because a lot of things has been simplified through your direct taxes and with the GST through the indirect taxes. But what will be going to be the criticals going forward? Say, for example, is a certain expense side, say filing of information. Now, for example, earlier one person who used to fly from Mumbai to Chennai, and he used to enjoy this privilege from the company. Those data were not traceable by the taxation authority. Now, those kind of data is accessible by the taxation authority by way of artificial intelligence, because they have set up the various systems which actually figure it out who is the beneficiary. So this kind of a scenario is likely to be a very, very going to be challengeable, and it is one of the reasons also why the GST collections has grown up. Jump up too much in the last 2 financial year. Mainly on the account of 2 parameters. One is the lot of digitizations happen, because your entire supply chain is buying on the white economy. So your black economy getting converted into the white economy. And the other side is that the people is now realizing if if they will not, try to match and whatever the this information is went to the regulatory authorities and the kind of response they are getting, it is bringing a lot of ethical behavior. I'm saying a lot of ethical behaviors are coming into the Indian ecosystems, which was a missing earlier.
Great. I think I would like to sort of get you, Rohit, here. I think Satya made an interesting point here, that a lot of ethical behavior. Companies are coming into their own in terms of, even if it's a nudge by the government, by way of technology or what they're doing, there is perhaps an ethical behavior overlay being seen in some companies. I mean, that is sort of arguable with some of the recent trends that we've seen unveiled from the startups and companies. But the larger question, if I were to sort of ask you, Rohit, is, do you think that the face of compliance itself is changing? Do you think that compliance itself has been digitally transformed? And that really has changed the game of the business, changed the game fundamentally from top to bottom. And what is it in startups? Do you think digital companies, their DNA is to be more compliant? And what is it to say that startups perhaps are like that? And what is the changing factor there? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just throw a couple of lights on that. I think is compliance itself changing? Actually, if you see fundamentally, the planks of compliance are not changing, right? They've not changed for the last 30 or 40 years. The importance might be changing at at various levels, right? Now, in terms of, and I think Satyan Bhai was talking about this a minute back, right? I think things in India, compliance planks are changing and becoming, in my opinion, highly logical. And at some point of time, like for example, I think some of the panelists was also mentioning, right? At this point of time, I mean, given the position that we are in, we get to see a lot of notices and this and that for different customers and so on, right? Government knows everything that, okay, you in your corporate tax, you presented this as your revenue. In your 3B, this is your XYZ. In your 2A, this is your ABC. On your TDS, this is your, so they can now collect these various different data sources, okay? And they are in the back end, right? As you know, they are connecting these dots and saying there is a gap, okay? And they will send you a notice and say, fill this gap. Now, the fact that you can't make sense of your data is not their problem, okay? And literally, they're giving you 10 days for this. If you don't do this, it's a 16 to 18% fine, interest on top of the, kind of humiliation and tension that you have, right? So I think what compliance is changing very, very hard. And what has also happened is that the importance, like theoretically, a third world country with $2,000 per capita income, why should it even think about compliance? I mean, theoretically, right? Like, isn't compliance for the rich, quote unquote, right? I think what the government has realized, as everybody is digitizing, the mindset has changed that we have to have compliance as well. And it is everywhere. It showed up in RERA sometime, it showed up in GST sometime. Anything that is large around us and not compliant will become compliant. So it's a mindset shift on the government side. And they are now trying to push it down like a set of people in this 10-year period, right? Now, within that, things will also become digital. So there is a lot of change in the compliance world that and I'm being very honest and upfront here, we are struggling with this, right? Even as a company whose job is it, right? Because government is moving much, much, much faster than us, much faster, right? And they are going towards automation. They are going towards this and that. So it's our duty to advise our customers and clients on how to do this. And we also have to create so fast. And that's the thing, right? Now, in terms of startups, other question about startups, their DNA and so on. I think, see, fundamentally, startups have two things in general. I know there are exceptions, but they are born on digital infrastructure, right? And B, they are young as a company, right? Like, let's say an average startup age would be 27 years of age, 26 years of age, right? So for them, like, change is much more easier, right? Just mentally, change is much more easier. And they have no recollection, right? Like Jayaraji was alluding to various ways of managing taxation in the past, right? They don't know. They have not seen what used to happen in the excise world, right? For them, for the younger companies, right? They don't care. They're like, okay, this is logical. This is the right way to do. What are the tools? Let's spend and let's get it done. Right? So they don't have the burden of the past. They don't have like how things used to happen in 1990s. They don't know, right? You could manage a tax guy, not the tax itself, right? They don't know, and frankly, they don't want to do things that way. So I think to me, it is like and I'll give you a sense, right? As you guys are aware, right? Startups have like, a lot of burn, a lot of this, that, and so on. Despite that, right? They invest in technology upfront. And that is why in the startup world, a 30, 40, 50% growth is considered slow, right? Because they are saying we have to grow fast. For this, we need to get it done. So the mindsets are honestly day and night.
So Bhalachandra, I would like to get you in a pretty interesting conversation thus far, and to the point of, I think the fundamentals, the moot point really here is a mindset change. The government itself is going through a generational shift, like what Rohit sort of pointed out, that 20 years work they want to do in 5 years, and they're putting these soft nudges in place by way of technology. But on the corporate side, there's in this clear demarcation from perhaps traditional first generation companies, age-old companies, and then there's this new crop of startups which are heavily funded, which at least want to be very high on compliance, infrastructure. So do you think that the expectation from a CFO in this world is far too much? As the world is increasingly becoming so complex and technically so much we are outpacing. So you think the expectation from a CFO leader is far too much? Do you feel that?
No, I think the expectations from CFO are not too much, but I think it's with the digitalization. I think it's all CFOs are on the top of this compliances, and the maybe external world might be thinking that yes, expectations are too much from the CFO, looking at every corner, like what the Vikas was mentioning, that there is a small ink needs to be checked. There is a metrology act if MRP is not mentioned. So yesterday also you can see the newspaper penalizing for some 80-70,000 on Misho, the new startup. So I think looking at each and every corner, from the manufacturing, from the labor laws, from the data privacy, from the FCPA and so on. So I think it's really too much expectation, but at the same time, as I mentioned, with the digitalization support, I think it is not too much. Once we have a disciplined approach towards overall compliance, looking at what is applicable at local level, I think it's really been a easy or a manageable the role which CFO has to perform, and that is what actually we have been doing it. So I think it's manageable, but at the same time, what you mentioned, yeah, it's too much expectation. Then one look at like different areas, like those are never finance. As a finance person, nobody gets into the what is happening at the manufacturing level, which ink is used, or what is the thickness, or whether it has an effect on the food and other. So there are many things, many aspects from all the different angles. So I think if we manage, or if we discipline our overall compliance, what is applicable from the local point of view, from the startup point of view, if your startup in this direction, in this segment, I think which are those laws are necessary to comply. The software, the computer would definitely help in managing this expectation. That is what I feel.
Okay, I think it's time for some concluding remarks. I think we are sort of getting ahead of time here. So I'll begin with you, Rohit, and get on to the panelists in terms of the concluding remarks and the message to regulators when it comes to compliance. I think the question to you maybe perhaps should be the message to the corporates. If you were to have a dispatch, and a very passionate dispatch to the corporates, what would that really be? And you can be as provocative as you want.
No, I think I've been provocative enough. I would just say 2 or 3 things, right? Fundamentally, compliance depth and compliance burden, if you consider it a burden, is going to keep increasing, right? It'll go everywhere. It'll go in many places, which so far we've had I would say the luxury of ignoring in India, right? Like, see, like things like OSHA, right? Like the safety, organization safety and so on. In India, were like largely missing, right? An American company or whatever, would have it just because the corporate has it. We were missing, right? So I think so this is here to stay. It'll get deeper. It'll get more complex, and the penalties and the slaps, as somebody called it, will continue to increase. Second is, it is impossible to do without taxation, without technology. Impossible. Okay. You will be doing your people a huge favor by helping them use technology. It cannot be done by outsourcing to big fours. It cannot be done just on your ERP with your local IT team. It cannot be done because it's a complex mix of domain, technology, and so on and so forth. That's how things are designed. And third is that if in your boardrooms, in your CEO and CFO mindsets, right, if you're not ready to deploy capital towards that, it just wouldn't happen, right? So I think these are the three things I would leave this with.
That's well said. What about you, Nehal? One dispatch to the corporates, what would that really be in terms of compliance and the importance of compliance to really have the message in their heads? Yeah.
Of course, people have talked enough about the technology, which is indispensable for day-to-day life to improve the efficiency. But I would say also one more thing is training and awareness is the critical thing, be it startup or be it the large corporate. The training is very, very important. Whenever there's a material amendments that comes, people have to get together in a conference room and just try to understand the replication of it. And we also have to bring, as a compliance professionals or be CS or CFO kind of, we need to explain them very, very clearly what is the downside if you do not comply. And this has to be a continuous process. It is not a one-time process. So basically, whatever I have done over the last couple of years is always a training helps a lot and awareness helps a lot. And that's what I would leave with this crowd with here.
Okay. Satyan, what about you? Perhaps you could have a message to regulators here.
I will be very short and sweet. It's like a reform, perform, and transform. Now, what is the meaning of a reform? So, open up yourself, open it to the new idea. Perform means submit everything on time. Don't get now indiscipline. That you will be a cost because speed is now going to be count. And a transformation, that means get open with the new technology, because a lot of technology, new technology will come. Currently, the AI and blockchain is quite in the early stage. It is required to get evolved, and it is going to be evolved, and that is going to be a very game changer in the entire process side. That's it.
Okay, reform, perform, and transform. What about you, Bhalachandra? Elevator pitch to the finance minister or the regulator, what would that be? You're stuck, imagine, with them. 2-minute dispatch to them, yes, from the corporate perspective.
Yeah, sorry. No, I think message to regulatory is, yes, they are very fast in terms of implementing changes. As you mentioned, Shrija, about the RegTech. So I think that regulatory technology is what going to last, and that is what required actually. Yeah.
Okay, what about you, Ved? Message for the regulators, what would that be?
So, Shreya, my point is, all these initiatives which I would say government is taking, particularly on compliance side through digital means. I think it's a good initiative overall, where transparency and some kind of easiness, accessibility, and bringing unorganized to organize. That is a good part, but at the same time, I would say the pace. I think Rohit was mentioning earlier, where instead of stabilizing anything, before that you are creating another thing, because so that is I would my viewpoint is that we should go step by step, instead of changing everything in a one go is bit difficult, especially for the corporates, like and nowadays as you mentioned, CFOs are expected to do everything, be it operational, be it business side, be it compliance side. And that's where my message to the regulatory or the bodies, that let's give some time to stabilize things and then probably go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, stabilize a little before bringing overhaul change. Yes, Jayaraj.
My view on this is slightly different. In fact, appreciate all the changes that is being brought out by the regulators on that front. But in the sense, more of a partnership is needed here between the industry and the regulators. In fact, barring apart the taxation side, GST and the indirect and indirect tax, there are still messes, in the new regulations that has been brought in by the government. For connect to making their life easier in terms of gathering data. So that non-compliances of that can even cause a shutdown of the operations of the units here. Documentation side, IDPMS, EDPMS, all those things, kind of a thing. So rather than a clear message is that ease out, try to make the life simple for the people operating out here, understand the difficulties, and there are much better ways to gather data. I totally appreciate the efforts that is being done by the regulator with respect to the compliance with respect to taxation side. That's perfectly okay, but other side of it, there still needs a lot of discussions, deliberations with the industry before jumping into the and implementing the solutions.
So more partnership with the industry, to have a more partnership approach with the industry in coming up with solutions. What about you, Vikas?
Yeah, I think the way they would have purchased a lot of printers to send us the notices, they will have to purchase a lot of paper shredders to close also those notices. Because once the notices are issued, I hardly think it gets closed quickly, and then it goes into years and years of litigation. So they should have the other side wherein they understand and close out the issues and close the notices also. So the good part already everyone has told that okay, they are moving fast and using technology. The other part is they have to ensure that they have to close out on the issues of the corporates.
Okay, I think since Rohit has been so provocative and taking sort of talking to the corporates that what they're not doing well, I think one of you should definitely ask a question to Rohit and put him on the hot seat here.
So, Shreya, can I go? Yes. So I have an interesting question.
So many questions for you, Rohit.
so no, it's a question to Rohit and probably the all colleague as well. See, in this digital world, while this technology and use of technology is very useful, very helpful, at the same time, one threat which is hanging, at least I am feeling that data security, cyber security, and so on, and data privacy, and so on and so forth. So that is where in this era where you use different channels to connect different APIs, different softwares, and within that there is a always fear where the responsibility lies on kind of CFOs, where they have to protect this data and protect everything from the cyber security kind of attacks and all. So that is one question, Rohit, and probably to other colleagues, how they are looking this.
Yeah. So I think
fair question.
It's a very good question. I would say, like, I mean, I wish I got this question more. I'll tell you why. It's actually self-serving, right? We actually spend so much money, like in our company, right? Securitizing from various different things. Like we literally do tests. Like if our CEO wanted to pull out this data, can he pull out the data, right? Like those kind of things, right? Like structurally, what are the things which prevent data from leaking? So when we go into some of the companies, right, I'm just giving you an example. When we go into these companies and we say, hey, you know what, this is what we are doing on security, right? They don't even understand how complex and difficult it is to keep data secure. As you rightly said, when it is transporting through APIs, there are multiple channels, there are stuff happening on email and so on and so forth. And then let me also it's obviously clear to all of you, but generally for audiences, right? Like for example, if you look at the data that we deal with, right, we deal with like very, very large companies. Many of them are listed, right? Literally, we are getting the sales data, right? That's like market moving data if it goes out, right? So we are so scared that we have to secure this data, right? Now, the great thing is that that government is again ahead here. Okay, there are again, without saying too much, like there are the privacy laws, data privacy laws that should be coming, in my opinion, in the next 6 months, and they are going to make GDPR regulations in Europe look like, kind of a walk in the park, right? How deep they are going, and they will again go at every breach will have, 6-digit, rupees level of any company, right? That is not serious about this. Let's say a company like us, which is dealing with data, for every line item level leak, we can get 10,000 to 1 lakh rupee fine. Our company would be bankrupted if we are not serious about it, right? So just like they're pushing the corporations, similarly, the data handling companies, they are going to come very hard at them, right? Because frankly, data is available for sale these days on various, like you want to get like, telecom data, and so it's available for sale. We all know it, right? It will become very, very, so the government is ahead. They'll come back with penalties and this and that. And in the spirits of startup, they will come out with a very tough law, and then they will see how to dilute it and so on. But it will feel like a shock to many people over there, right? So I think that is that. And second is, fundamentally, what I see is higher quality service providers will emerge from this, right? Because a higher bar is being kept. And I'll tell you, even right now, like for any, like for example, we deal a lot with a lot of German companies, Korean companies, Japanese companies, right? So their finance team has to conform with global norms, right? So they're like focus on ISO 27001, BAPT test, show me this certificate, show me that certificate, is actually very, very high, right? Like they would not go with the cheapest provider, right? Whereas in India, a lot of our companies have to evolve that, right? That to say, hey, you know what, these 3 or 4 things are important, right? We are still in a place where we are saying, just give me the cheapest malya, right? So we are running in every company, we are running a L1 process fundamentally, right? Wo bhi chahiye, but I wanted cheap. So I think it's just a matter of evolution there. The good thing is there are service providers of all sorts available in the market today. It's up to the companies, their CEOs, their CFOs to figure out what they want to spend. It is available out there.
So Ved, he has put the ball in your court now. I think we should have a tougher question for Rohit. Yes. Yeah. I think we should just wrap it up. Yeah.
So can I respond to the Ved for this on a particularly cybersecurity and privacy policy?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm also the cybersecurity expert. So see, going forward, as more data is coming and more digitization happens, if anybody believes that the data will be 100% security, is a myth. It won't happen. You can restrict up to some extent, because how you are designing your architecture is going to be quite important. So get focused as being a CFO, because that going to be CFO will be considered going forward as a chief custodian for a data. So your designing of architecture is going to be key criticals, and you need to develop the skills to understand those architectures. So it's no longer the accounting guy can be so you need to come out of your domain and need to understand the technology parts. And let's see how, as far as the privacy is concerned, we have to see a lot of things is under debate. How much it is acceptable going forward, we don't know. But today, India is one of the most highest surveillance country in the world. That is a reality.
Great. I do feel it's a great time to wrap this conversation up. And I think, Rohit, a lot of questions coming in your way. And perhaps I'm sure after this panel also. And I think given the answers, perhaps by the next time we get into conversation with Clear, it might be a unicorn just providing compliances to us, and becoming a unicorn is giving a service provider in that space. But till time I see you next, goodbye and good luck. We had a very meaningful discussion, unraveling various points of view. And till the time I see you next, goodbye and good luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.